But at the end of the day, the basics are all the same, aren't they? You know, when you think about the flight performance, we're thinking about what sort of things, Ross.
I knew that.
You were just trying to like just hide away. What do you reckon?
Right. Well, flight performance. But the first thing is weight.
Oh, when we talk about
Oh,
yeah, okay, no, yeah, fine. Yes, sorry. Yep, yep, absolutely.
yeah.
Yes.
Wait, that's one thing to think of, isn't it?
Yes, of course it is. Yeah, that's right. Because how does that impact?
Well, that could impact like performance, the amount of fuel it can carry.
Yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
lots of anything can carry.
Yeah, that's right. How quick it can climb. But one of our biggest impacts is making sure we're not over the limit on the weight, isn't it? But you're right to say, yeah, actually, how much fuel can we take? Can we get to where we want to go in one go?
Yeah.
Otherwise, when we get to the planning stage, we might discover that on the weight side of it, right, we can take enough fuel for 1 hour, but where we want to go is 3 hours away. Well, we're going to have to stick a couple of extra stops in there somewhere along the lines, aren't we? Yeah, absolutely. Good. And what else? What else in the performance part of it? The flight performance.
We talk about like temperature now.
I was going to say,
Could be. Yeah.
That would affect the performance of the engine.
Yeah. Anything else? I mean, there's lots, but yep, absolutely. Yeah, the pressure settings. If it gets noise, we'll have to shut the door. In fact, I will. Anything else on performance? Glenn, anything you've read yet at all on performance? And maybe because of the, when we talk about this subject, flight performance and planning.
The speed.
Yeah, good. Yeah, the speed that we fly at, because that's going to impact on
the inclinations. Inclinations. How a flying helicopter or airplane can incline.
As in, well, no, we already mentioned climbing performance.
Yeah, so you're actually right. This you said about the speed, didn't you? As in how fast we're flying, because what will that affect if we fly faster or slower?
Fuel consumption.
Potentially fuel consumption. Yeah, very good. Absolutely. Because most helicopters, sorry, to apologize, sorry, I'll try and get that clear soon. Most helicopters burn the least amount of fuel per hour back at around about 50 to 60 knots, but that doesn't mean to say they'll go the furthest. That's at a slightly higher speed. So it already starts to delve into that side of things. So if we want to make the fuel go the furthest, we need to fly at a particular speed. But the other thing about speed is affects the time. Of course it does, doesn't it?
So that's
you fly slow, it takes longer.
That's the difference between endurance and
range. Yes, that's right. Yeah, good. So potentially when we fly somewhere, you might want to fly for range speed, range fuel, especially if you're quite heavy and you can't take a lot of fuel. You want to try and get the most out of it to get the furthest, because you might not be able to make the fuel stops. It all starts to tie in, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And so then it leads very nicely into the planning aspect of it, which I really love, is trying to work out, okay, well, where are we going to go? Where are we going to stop for fuel? What about if they're not open? Blah, 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 all those sort of things. Yeah. Good. Anything else if we talk about the performance?
Can we actually get airborne?
Yes.
Can we pull the ground effect out of ground effect?
Yeah, good, excellent. So I wanted to sort of touch upon those.
Is it the max full power rating 5-minute limit?
Yes, you see, when you think about the helicopter has a certain, can't exceed the weight limit. So take the Cadbury 700 kilos. So we could think, fine, David and I, we can go flying. We could take, I'll have to quickly guess, probably about 140, maybe 150 litres, I should think, somewhere around about there. But that doesn't mean to say it'll get off the ground for a start off, does it? And if it does get off the ground here, it doesn't mean to say we can go and land where we want to go, because where we want to land might be at a higher altitude with thinner air, and it might not have that performance. And that is something we would definitely need to look up before we went flying. It would be a fairly safe assumption to say if it got off the ground here and we went to another airfield of a similar elevation as Elstree, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to make an approach and come into land. That would be a fairly safe assumption. But if we knew we were going somewhere high up, yeah, we'd want to look at that. And therefore, in the flight manual or in the Robinson Pilot Print Handbook, you would find these performance charts, which would suggest whether it could or couldn't hover in or out ground effect, but the weight configuration of when you arrive at that place, therefore you have to start working out how long it takes you, how much fuel you're going to have burnt, to fathom out roughly how much you'll weigh at that moment in time and what to expect, isn't it? Whether you can expect you're going to have to come in with a running landing, which is never a great idea. Imagine that. We're going to Courchevel. Yay, excellent. Don't worry, guys. You're going to have to do a running landing. With a bit like there'll be snow and ice there. You just come to a lovely sliding stop. And then take off. Yes, fine. We'll turn it round by hand and we'll just kind of slide off down the runway downhill with a bit like we'll get up enough speed and off we go. Sounds like a great plan. I'm up for it. Yeah.
In Nepal, the government doesn't choose the airplane to go higher towards the Alpines to the Everest. They try not to use the airplane, the helicopter, but try to use the drone. Why? Our helicopter have the possibility to go to 7,000, 8,000
meters. You're talking about. But so why use a drone? Did you say?
Yeah, because they say it's too expensive to use the helicopter when that is so high.
Well, it depends what it is you want to achieve. If you're talking about helping relay radio transmissions, you just need a drone for that, don't you? You don't need a person up there. You don't need a big expensive airplane. You could just send a drone up. But if you want to go and rescue somebody off a mountain, you probably don't want an aeroplane because it's quite tricky landing on top of mountains or mountainsides. And a drone, I mean, okay, nowadays they're pretty, some of them are really powerful, aren't they? They can easily lift a person, but it might not have the endurance to get up there. So a helicopter. So, this is why you have different aircraft for different roles. To just bring it back into the performance side of things, anything else you want to chuck in there for a minute on performance? We've talked about maybe weights
talked about
and balance goes hand in hand with that. Yeah. Whether it's got the performance to get even off the ground if we make it at its maximum takeoff weight, whether it'll land at this other place that we want to land, especially if it's a high altitude one. We talked about the speed, and you brought it up, didn't you? That'll impact on how much fuel you burn, how long it will take you, of course. We might have to consider sunset, for instance, or these sorts of factors.
And the temperature.
And what, sorry?
Temperature, is it too hot or too cold?
The temperature, yes. Yeah, that's right, because they do have operating temperatures, limits on that as well. So that's a consideration. You'll find that in the flight manual for the Capri. Sorry, they're called different things just to really throw us. Robinson's Pilot's Open Handbook and the
flight manual.
Capri's flight manual. So Robinson being American, Pilot Open Handbook, Capri being European, if you want to say, but yeah. Flight manual. So what would the Jet Ranger be?
Oh, it's American. So
yes.
It should be a pilot.
No, it's flight manual. Just so there's no pattern, as far as I'm aware of. It's just
they feel like.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, good. So when we are looking at fuel calculations, does anybody else join me? No, that's fine. Just cut them off a minute. What are we considering in our fuel calculations?
So fuel calculations. So there's the weight of the fuel. So
good. Dawn, can you hear when, for instance, Ross talks?
I can hear him, but I couldn't hear some of the other people in the room.
Okay, yeah, no problem. All right.
Do I have to talk louder?
Gather round. Come on, come a bit closer. Come on, there's plenty of room for you. Ross, yeah, come and sit over here. I know that's the comfy chair. Mind the glass, won't you?
Yeah. Let's move that. Can't sit there, come on.
No, you can come see it. Look, you can see it.
Come on then.
People can see that. I'm not really by myself. You can come and share some of. There we are. Hey.
Right.
And this is fine. Look, I'm sitting on the left. It feels normal. It's quite all right. So yeah, fuel calculations. What are some of the things we want to take into consideration?
Passengers.
How much
carry?
Yes, indeed. So we need to, like Dawn just said about passengers, obviously, we need to maybe look at the weights we've already got in the aircraft, haven't we? So the question is, something like, does the fuel calculation come first, last, in the middle, just a random guess?
First,
Mm,
David's gone for the end.
Mm.
Glenn, you said the first. Malcolm's.
I suppose it's at the end, depending on what the other factors are. Yeah.
well, it's like you say, oh, I want to carry 2 passengers. They're quite hefty.
How much
Which
do I
then, how
take?
much weight have I got left
Yeah.
before I can fly? Oh, I can't get there. Do I leave a passenger behind?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so it's at the end.
Yeah.
It's the last thing we.
That's
It's
it.
not the last thing we think about because through your mind you already start the cogs start to whir. But you need to take all the other weights into factor first of all. Remember, you can't have your helicopter being too heavy. You've got something to work with. Being mustn't be too light, believe it or not, for auto rotation, but mustn't be too heavy. Not that it wouldn't necessarily fly, but why mustn't it be too heavy? Potential structural limitations. Anything else? Mustn't be too heavy because
I thought it would seem obvious. You need to be able to,
Power.
power.
yeah, like I say, it
land.
might be that it can still get off the ground quite happily, even if you've got it right on its maximum weight, or maybe one day you miscalculated it was actually overweight. It might still get off the ground. Doesn't it say it wouldn't fly? But definitely structural limitations. Yes,
it's not possible to go too high
it might not go as high as you would like, of course. Yes, good.
because the oxygen is rarity, and when there is return move, there's not the power enough to go up.
Center of
Can you think
mass,
of
because if a passenger is quite heavy, you might want to balance it out a bit, or if they're too light as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so when we think about it, we mustn't take a helicopter past or an aircraft past its maximum takeoff weight because it could be very much a structural thing. The parts will wear out quicker maybe than the manufacturers designed it for. Got to think about that side of things, haven't you? You could even buckle something, couldn't you? Break something, which would be even far worse than it just wearing out a little bit prematurely. What if, literally part of the structure of the aircraft can't cope with that amount of weight. Cracks, breaks, wouldn't be good, would it?
They might be fine in normal ops, but if something went wrong, you then may not then have.
Yes, very good. Yeah. So under normal, you might think, I don't know what he's talking about. Look, it flies absolutely fine. But now you need to do something with it that's not normal, like David just said, maybe a maneuver of some description, like a steep turn, or perhaps an emergency maneuver of some description or other. And yes, it might actually not be able to capable of doing that. They could fall into play, couldn't it?
Yeah,
Then we get into the whole engine as well. Presumably that's going to be working harder for the same job. That might not last as long. It might not necessarily just break, but it might not last as long.
If you were at the I-22s at maximum all-up weight, you might be going over the 5-minute rating with that, no?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So there's all these sorts of things. Take the Jet Ranger. I'm fairly convinced if you actually put way too many people and fuel in there, the structure of it, it's pretty sturdy aircraft, would be fine. But what will happen now is the engine, which can outperform the aircraft, you'll over torque it. So the engine will outperform the gearbox, the transmission, and these things called the Thomas couplings and buckle all that side of things. So the engine will be absolutely fine, but the rest of it wouldn't. So it falls back into that structural component damage. So it is actually quite important, isn't it? The manufacturer said, for instance, 700 kilos for a good reason. It's not just a random number. It's so that it keeps it nice and safe, that it can operate to that kind of theoretically the entire length of its life and still be safe and perform adequately as per the manuals, etc., etc. So we shouldn't abuse that at all. Right. So yes, of course, fuel calculations. We better make sure we've counted for everybody or everything you want to take with you. Your coat, your bag, pack lunch, a laptop, the cover for the aircraft. Oh, we better take the wheels with us. Some extra spare oil, please. Some polish.
2 lots of oil.
Some extra maps.
Hair
More
gel.
iPads. Yeah, before you know it, you've maybe got a few excess things that we don't need. Okay, no worries. And we look at all of that, wouldn't we? And what we've got left between that and what we're allowed it to be. So if we were just per se at 600 kilos at this point in the Cadbury, I'm only doing that because it's metric, you've got another 100 kilos of the fuel you can take. Brilliant. But is that fuel going to be enough for what you want to do? So how do we do these fuel calculations.
Distance and weight.
Come over here, Claire. I can't hear you. Come over here, Maddie. You're so far, I
Come
can't
on.
hear you. I've got the fan on now, so in here because it's just to cool us down.
How long you want to fly?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
the weight of the airplane, because more heavy is the airplane, and more consumption go up.
Yes. At the moment, we're talking the whole along the lines of, right, we're not allowed to make it more than 700 kilos, the Capri. So there's your upper limit. That's your maximum takeoff weight. And we're going to put people and baggage in and all sorts of things. And you've kind of got this bit left. This is the bit you've got for fuel. This is the weight you've got left. And I just said just loosely 100 kilos, for instance. Oh gosh, what's that off the top of my head? 110 litres, roughly speaking, something along those lines, just as a quick thought, a split second there. 110 litres, right, that's how much fuel we can take. Is that sufficient for the flight we want to do? Now, I haven't specified the flight yet, but what would 110 litres, for instance, do for us?
Well, what's the fuel burn?
Good,
Wow.
that's what I'm after, great.
Yeah.
What's the fuel burn? So, David, what would you say?
35 litres, 35, 37 an hour.
Blair, I know you're very new to it at the moment, but
I think 35 because when I float with a cabbage was 78.
what about if I said, oh, but sometimes it burns 10 litres an hour?
Sometimes.
What if I said 40, what's the worst, 44 litres an hour? Who's right? Who's wrong? How can it be 10 litres an hour?
Well,
The cavalry, it burns
Idling.
40 liters an
Yeah,
hour.
When we're doing tests on the Capri and those sorts of things, some of it might just be purely idling. Literally, it doesn't burn an awful lot. Maybe I'll just pluck in the figure, but let's just say 10 litres an hour. I didn't say we're going anywhere yet. But the whole point, what I'm trying to do is provoke you to think about the fuel burn. 40 litres is kind of recognised for the Capri G2. We do see it quite often burn 35 in a 1 hour sortie, but that 1 hour sortie is including startup and shutdown where it's idling at maybe only 10 litres an hour. If you are literally flying along at trying to do 100 knots and you're pulling right up to your maximum continuous power, so just the bottom of the amber, depending on how new the engine is and a few other factors, how dirty roads are, I've seen it doing 44 litres an hour, nothing ever higher than that. So there's a bit of variation there, isn't there? If we said 35 to 44, I mean, that's 9 litre difference. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you now spread that over potentially maybe up to 4/5 hours the Capri can be airborne for, that's a significant difference, isn't it? Yeah, significant difference. Especially if, unfortunately, you've been basing on 35 and it's burning.
You've crashed.
Oh, what happened? Can you guys hear me? Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, cool.
Those of us who are remote anyway.
I think,
All these sorts of things will have an impact.
wait,
And the actual
you just
testing
crashed
course-
for a minute.
Oh, sorry. Are we back on yet?
Yeah, you are. I can see you and hear you loud and clear.
Thank you, Jared. Yeah, with that great variation, it would depend on, like I say, the circumstances of the flight. You're trying to fly fast, you're trying to be more conservative for the fuel burn. Are we heavy? Are we light? The density of the air will have a big impact. How clean your rotor blades are will have a small impact as well on actual true fuel burn. We need to always take that into consideration. When you fly some of the bigger helicopters, the variation can be quite significant. And then you just go from one helicopter to another. A 44 is always quite a good example. The best I've ever seen is actually our one in its previous life, occasionally burnt down. I did see it once do 8 gallons an hour, which is unheard of in an R44.
Yeah.
There's a lot of obviously on the ground stuff or autos, but it used to regularly do about 10 to maximum 12 gallons an hour. It now does typically 12 gallons an hour. Very occasionally it slips down to 10. But it can, if you also max continuous power for a flight, 14, and that's US gallons.
Yeah.
So again, that's a
Big
fairly
difference.
significant difference. Yes.
Over a length of time.
Yes. Now, you could just simply say, fine, we'll just work a worst case scenario for a single time. But then what can happen is you'll always be thinking that you can't do as much as maybe it really can do. But then you don't want to shortchange yourself and think, it's all right, it'll only burn about 10 an hour, as I said, and you won't necessarily reach your next fuel stop. When we get into the planning part of this, when we're kind of, around a fair bit of the UK, to be fair, there's actually an awful lot of places we can just nip into and get fuel if we have run a bit short. It's not the end of the world. But then you get to some of the more remote areas, maybe Scotland, etc., and Wales, and the Lake District, again, there are far less fuel stops out there. You need to be very accurate with your planning and monitoring of your fuel to ensure you can actually do the flight you've planned out. And then you have to have very early thoughts of diversions for fuel in case you can't actually get to that destination.
Well, because if the wind changes, you get a bit more headwind.
Yeah, exactly. When we do some of our trips and we go up to Oban, that leg there from say Kirkbride area, top of the Lake District, if we got a headwind, that nudges 3 hours. Now the helis can just about do that. That's a 3-hour stint to get to Oban for fuel, and there is not a lot else out there. So we have to make a very early call as to whether we're going to achieve that or not. So we're monitoring that fuel burn very carefully, to ensure we're going to get. So we literally got points of, right, we should have this much here, this much here. There's our cutoff. That point there on this journey is where if we can make it, we go. If we can't, if there's any doubt, we're going to have to divert to go get fuel somewhere else. So yeah, whereas around here, it's like, I would be fine. We can always just nip into Denham or nip here or nip there. That'll be all right. So we were quite, we're very fortunate around here.
Yeah, you're not really more than what would you say, more than 20 minutes away?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, exactly. Easily.
So many.
So many around, generally speaking, and very welcoming. We can just nip in for fuel for getting a little bit on the short side of things. I don't mean low, I just mean getting short of the midline. So how do we structure this fuel calculation then? So we've got to fathom out the burn, first of all. Okay, we'll just stick to the Cadbury for 1 second. We'll just say, well, let's play safe. Let's just say 40 litres an hour for the moment. So can you remember?
Is a reserve?
We do. What do we mean by reserve, David?
There are regulatory minimum fuel requirement that we must keep intact unless we're in something gone very wrong.
Yeah, what's that based on, that minimum manufacturer legal fuel requirement? You found that, yeah? So
the helicopters, I think it's 20 minutes.
It is, yeah, good. 20 minutes.
That will be superseded by whatever AOC or ATO you're flying under.
Yes, good. Absolutely. So the manufacturer's got to have something, haven't they? And it's usually based on 20 minutes of fuel burn. That's right. That becomes the kind of, really need to have it on the ground at that moment in time, or the low fuel light comes on, or to that extent, but not always. Not always. So the if you take the Robinson, the low fuel light comes on when you've got 5/10 minutes at cruise power. So it's well within that 20, but that's not an excuse therefore. And it says in the POH, don't use the fuel light as a guide of when to, land the helicopter and refuel, because it's not 20 minutes.
No,
we should be factoring that in, shouldn't we? And the fuel light is really the kind of last resort of, I've really cut that a bit fine.
Well, because I didn't know what kind of fuel tank his has, but it's an aluminium. It's not a bladder, isn't it?
That's right. So it's got the
5 minutes. Yeah, not 10.
It's enough to get you from 9,000 feet back down to the ground again.
Yeah,
which is where it's allowed to fly up to 9,000 feet above the ground. Okay, so we've got 100 litres spare fuel capacity because of our weight in the Cadbury. 100 litres, we know it burns 40 litres an hour. Therefore, it's got how much fuel available?
I actually say like 80 litres will get you 2 hours.
2 hours and some change.
That's right, 2 hours and some change. Good. But now the question is that change? Is that 20 litres left? A, within the manufacturer's specification, and B, like Dave just said, your flying school, etc., or your ATO you're operating under.
At least in the US, it would be.
Yes.
It's what, 30 minutes?
Yeah, we usually say a good sort of 30, depends on the accurate fuel gauges and one thing or another, depending on the helicopter and a few other bits and bobs. But generally speaking, we sort of normally pitch it for about half out of 45 minutes. That's not your reserve. You need to be on the ground to give you a buffer of safety between that and the manufacturer, or the legality 20 minutes. Then you get down to the whole warning light side of things as well.
Yeah.
So it's to try and make sure it's keeping you lovely and safe. And if you just slightly miscalculated on your fuel, it's not too serious if you come back with a bit less, but we do want to know why you've managed to come back with less. How did you get that fuel calculation so wrong? Okay, good. So out of 100 litres, we can chop off, for instance, straight away the 20, and that also covers the whole manufacturers and covers the minimum 20 minutes. Leaves you 80, which is 2 hours.
2 hours.
Hey, good. But is that like 2 hours of, oh, right, I can use that. That's my 2 hours for on the journey.
Start up.
Nah, I think probably between taxiing, run up, and what else? Factoring headwinds probably might burn a bit more or use a bit more fuel than you had planned for.
It would be safe to say that 80 litres should give us a reasonably healthy, as long as we're not trying to make it run flat out and it's not a dreadful Cadbury that's been abused and the poor thing doesn't, run very well. 80 litres should give us a good 2 hours, probably more in truth, but we'll just say 2 hours per minute. My question is if we planned that the journey from start to finish is going to be 2 hours, would that be enough fuel? So Ross
Yeah,
said
we
no.
would still have what, 30 minutes in reserve if the journey is 2 hours.
Sorry, because I was thinking of, okay, if you plan for an alternate, you need enough fuel to get there.
Good. Yes, of course you do.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to
Well,
get
yeah,
at is, if you take, once again, the 100, as far as we're concerned,
Yes.
on the ground. If you're going to take one of our helicopters, correct, but you need to be on the ground with no less than 20 litres. If you land with less than 20 litres, we have to have a bit of a conversation and go through some forms as to find out why you've landed with less than what we stipulated, trying to keep you lovely and safe. So you've got to take that 20 straight away.
Yeah.
So what the last thing you want to do is plan a flight whereby you are just about going to land with your minimum fuel. That's cutting it fine. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of aggravation. So you would want to, depending on where you're going, factor in a good half hour of contingency. Depends where you're going. Let's say if you're going to Oban, we have to factor in about an hour and a half or nearly 2 hours worth of contingency fuel to get ourselves to the next fuel stop. It's massive because there's just nowhere else to refuel out then. It's so remote, as it were. Whereas around here, half hour's plenty. You've already just said everywhere's within, say, 20 minutes. It's easy another fuel stop in 20 minutes' time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Generally, no problem at all. And of course, around here, worst case scenario, we could land in a field and just, whoops, I've misjudged, but you land safely somewhere. It's hardly a hostile environment, is it? Other than the locals.
Pitchfork.
Okay, so we take the 100, get rid of 20 as a zero fuel, basically. That's why I want to think of it. That's zero fuel, 20. So that's zero. Half hour contingency. So that's another 20 gone. That now leaves you 60. 60 will buy you hour and a half. So therefore, you can happily go, let's say an hour and a half. Will that get you to where you want to go? Yes, great.
Right.
No, fine. You're going to need to plan a fuel stop, aren't you? Or, because you so desperately want to go, say, sorry, passenger, you can't come with me. I'm going by myself. Bye. And taking Victor Hotel down to the south of France was a good example. I did go by myself, which meant I had to do far less fuel stops. Well, not far less, but 1/possibly 2 less fuel stops. Because I didn't have that weight with me, I can literally take full fuel, no problems at all. Whereas potentially coming back, I might have somebody with me. Right, I've got to plan in the extra fuel stops now because I won't necessarily, depending on who it is, be able to take enough fuel to do the same return journey, especially if there's a headwind, for instance, isn't there?
Yeah.
Good. So therefore, sorry if I keep pushing this point, but I just wanted to really think about this. So I said, so the the place we want to go to is an hour and a half away. Are we good to go?
Yeah, we'd be good to go.
We've got happily an hour and a half worth of fuel. Are we good to go? We ready?
Wait, can you repeat the question, please?
So the question is if we've decided if we take 100 litres, subtract
Mhm.
20, just put that aside. That's zero fuel,
Okay.
isn't it? Basically, get rid of it.
It's
It's got to have that. It's absolutely got to have that in there. You've got another 20 you're going to take and just put to the side. That's your contingency if you just haven't flown very well, or, oh, let's go over here and have a quick look over here. Oh, let's have a look at that en route, because that happens. Then you burn a bit more because it takes a bit longer.
Yeah.
Maybe you've flown a little slower than you planned for, etc., etc. So that's that extra 20, isn't it? Just a little half hour. left you with 60 litres, which is good for an hour and a half. The destination's an hour and a half away. Good to go?
Oh, I thought I mentioned it. I thought about the alternate as well.
Yes, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. But the 20 minutes can potentially do
Right.
that.
Yeah.
What's the weather like?
Yeah, absolutely. The weather could be delays en route, but let's just say no, there's no delays. It looks plain sailing. The wind is negligible. It's an hour and a half, David, that way, straight line. Don't need to look at anything en route. We could just cruise along there nice efficiently. I'll be good to go. But there's something I'm missing. I'm not saying. Come on, think.
Nah, I don't think we'd be good to go.
Because
What was the
come on,
what was
what's the,
that you said? Because
what's the bit I haven't said?
Oh.
And believe it or not,
what
this
about
occasionally-
traffic at the airport? Like we have to wait. What if we don't get clearance to land right away? Are we going to another airport or just some?
Now we've just hit it.
Are we talking holding?
I haven't said where
Yeah,
we're going.
just waiting on where we going and if we have to wait
Well, we-
for clearance to
for
land
lunch.
or something like that.
We're going out for lunch. Where the hell do we get the fuel from when we land?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah, it's a
yeah.
we
I didn't say we're going to another airport, did I? I
Oh,
did
yeah,
not say
no,
it. We're in a
no.
helicopter. That's the whole point of these things.
Yeah, yeah.
You go to these amazing places like Stores Hall Hotel on Windermere. Fantastic it is. It's brilliant. The last thing you want to do is land there and, oh my God, what about the fuel?
We've now
know?
got to start
Yeah.
up and we can't get 20
You're now
minutes
thinking,
to
oh my gosh,
fill up
that 30
afterwards.
minutes of contingency,
Yeah.
that wasn't really meant for, and now that's to get us to the next fuel stop. That was just if things didn't go particularly well en route. So you've got to think about that side of things as well. And we do, there are some trips that are like that. You land something, we realize, yeah, but you won't have enough fuel safely to get to the fuel stop. So now we've got to think about refueling en route just purely because to get back
But
to the
then-
fuel stop afterwards.
But then it's like if that fuel stop off, then you don't want to be too heavy for your destination.
Correct,
Yeah.
yes. So it's
But,
really
yeah.
this is what I wanted to do, provoke that thought
Have the
process
Heli
of,
museum at Western Supermare.
it's not just chuck a load of fuel and off we go, is
Yeah,
it?
let's fill right up right before we land at our next
Exactly, yeah.
destination.
So again,
Yeah.
Stores Hall Hotel is a really good example
Yeah.
because the approach in and out is the way, there's only really one way safely, one way in, and then safely one way out. One way might be in to win, but the way out might not be. So you don't want to go in there heavy. You need to go in light, but the next fuel stop's quite a long way away.
Hmm.
So you've got to have enough fuel when you go in to get you to safely to the fuel stop, but not be too heavy to go and land. And there's a real juggling act sometimes, depending on which helicopter you're in, as to how forgiving it will be for that.
Yeah.
How much you can get away with. The 44s, if you just go with two people, generally it's not a problem. It's got plenty of extra spare, especially if it's just the two of you.
Yeah.
But you take the R22, yeah, that might be cutting it a bit finer because of you're already at maximum occupancy, aren't you, in the
Yeah.
cockpit with all our extra luggage and God knows what else we've carried. So it doesn't necessarily have quite that extra capacity available to it. So yeah, don't forget about that.
Hmm.
That side of things. So I have seen people get caught out by that or not considered it.
Yeah.
Good, right. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere with that whole fuel side of things, that fuel calculation. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Good. Right, so then we got into the weight and balance. So we've just been talking about the weight, don't be too heavy. And then what do we mean by the balance? If you know straight away, we're talking about, just hold back a second in case somebody doesn't. What do we mean by the balance of the aircraft? I'm going to attempt to start sharing up on that separate screen.
How the weight is organized inside the airplane.
Potentially, but remember in helicopter. You keep saying aeroplane. That's all right. It's fine. It's all right. We don't mind. No. Yes, that's right. Where you might distribute that weight. We were talking earlier before everybody joined about passengers. It might be that we have to distribute them in a certain way because people are generally different weights, and we might not want too much weight up front, or potentially too behind, or on the left side or the right side, etc., etc. Take a very light pilot has to take weight with them to pull them within that balance envelope. So what do we, what else do we mean by that whole balance side of things?
You remain within the certified limits of the helicopter.
Yeah, good, absolutely. So we've got to make sure the balance stays within those written limits. Sometimes we see it as a visual thing, don't we? An envelope. But what does that mean?
It means that the control forces availability will remain such that you can operate.
Yeah, good.
So
So
you
a lot of
won't-
people don't often when we start talking about
Limits for the
balance, they don't
Yes.
realise it's not that it won't fly as such. It won't suddenly just flip over or roll in the sky. It's we might not actually have enough control input to offset that odd weight. If you imagine a seesaw with somebody very heavy one end, where it's going to flick the other end up in the sky. Imagine we had a control that we can kind of potentially pull that side up, but at some point it hits a limit, and if it hasn't achieved what we need to achieve, we've got no more control, have we? And so that could be really dangerous. When do you think you would discover whether you've got your balance calculation right, apart from on the chart?
When you crash.
Yeah, when you get to crash, yeah. When you go to,
Try to lift.
when you try to lift. Right, with a bit of luck, this will work.
Because I did see
You're
two
going to
quite
find your cycle.
quite generous gentlemen
Hopefully.
in a yellow R44
Can you all online see a spreadsheet?
cyclist.
Yeah, I can see
Hey.
Cabri G2 weights and
I have
balance.
no idea what to do with my laptop at the moment because my mouse has disappeared. Where the hell's it gone? Oh, it's up there. Sorry. This is a technical nightmare. I've got a new laptop I'm just trying to get used to. It's basically the same as the old one, but I've got you on a different telly that I'm trying to project to and then share this anyway. Right, good. Okay, so oh gosh, yeah.
Trying to share that.
Hang on a minute. Let me put it up there so you can see that as well then. See if I can enlarge that. It won't jump to my other screen. Hey! And well, okay, we can sort of see some of it. Why has it gone like that? Ah, oh, for goodness sakes. I'll have to I'll bring it back down here. Sorry, bear with me. It's a good job I don't do this bit for a living.
Paul, at some point, I will give you some lessons.
Thank you, Sophie. I needed. I can fly a helicopter, all right? That's all I really need to do. That's all that really matters. Okay, can you see my screen, all right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Get around otherwise. Right, so what have we got here? We've got a weight and balance chart for the
G2.
Hey, any particular G2?
Echo Hotel.
Yay! How do you know that's Echo Hotel's one?
Because it says Echo Hotel on it.
But how do you know that's for Echo Hotel?
Because there'll be a certificate that states the numbers that are used on it published for the helicopter in the
Just because it says Echo Hotel on it doesn't mean to say it's Echo Hotel. What do we need to check?
the weight and balance certificate for the aircraft.
In comparison to
Airworthiness
the...
certificate.
Activate the operation
Yes,
index
good. That's right. So
and,
over here. So these... Can you still see my screen okay? Yeah, good.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got to check this. Like the basic empty weight, 435.18 kilos, haven't we? And those sorts of things. You need to make sure those numbers are correct. What if somebody's messed with the spreadsheet? I mean, they're locked, but just what if? Don't jump straight into it. Don't just go, oh, right, okay, it's Echo. Let's just double check. If we're going to do it properly, we ought to just make sure they all match up okay. Good, then we can consider using it. We do quite a lot of that gross error checking, don't we? Just make sure we're not about to do something really stupid with it. All right. And so, of course, I mean, a lot of this is fairly self-explanatory. The right seat, who's going to be sitting in there? Should we just do some fairly nominal numbers? Oh, look, we'll have a fairly light pilot. Left seat, we'll have a 150. So 11 stone. The right door's on, so we don't need to put anything in there. Otherwise, we would put a no in there if it's off. That'll already be calculated. I'm just actually curious to see what it does if I put yes in there. Nothing. I've just never written yes in there before. And main luggage compartment. So what does it allow for anything to be in there already, the luggage compartment?
No.
Depends what's been listed as the drive operating weight of the aircraft.
Yes, good. So potentially what might be in the luggage compartment that's included within the original weight of the helicopter, 435.18 kilos.
Any items
Would it be
that
the
are-
pilot's operating handbook?
operation-
Yes, there might not be in the luggage compartment, but that's certainly within that weight of the aircraft.
So things like handling wheels might be classed as essential items.
It might be, that's right, and therefore they'd probably have to be in the luggage compartment because of the size of them. Good. First aid kit? because to be honest, there's not really anywhere else particularly safe to keep
Oils.
it. You could keep it in the nose of the
What
helicopter.
about a
Absolutely.
POH?
Fire extinguisher, POH, yes, but that's not necessarily in the luggage compartment. But so I'm just trying to get you to think.
Okay.
So what isn't included in the luggage compartment is everything else, i.e., in our helicopter, the covers, cleaning materials, spare oils. If we stuck wheels in there, we stuck our coats in there, if we stuck any bags in there, of course, none of that's included. We've got to now consider that, haven't we? So we could say, for instance, in the main luggage compartment at the moment, with the cover and the bottles full and whatnot, it's probably not that much. 5 kilos. Would be happy with that?
Yeah.
Good, because that's one put in anyway. And the front luggage compartment, that's the one right in the nose of the helicopter. There is actually something in there's a USB adapter and a lead. I mean, gosh, it's so light. We could probably try and put down, whatever, 0.2 of a kilo or something, but we can probably fairly safe to say just leave that as a 0. But if we want it to be absolutely spot on, yes, we might have to consider putting a tiny amount in there for it, because that'd be the right thing to do, wouldn't it? Cool. Okay. I just suddenly realised, sorry. Anybody seen any glaring errors?
Oh.
I've put 150 kilos for the. I'm working in pounds in my head in a second there. 150 kilos. That's quite heavy, isn't it?
So
All right.
70.
I'll just do 70. That sounds because I was just looking at the final figure, thinking it's 740 kilos. How's that happen? Bloody hell!
No, you can stick to pounds. Pounds is fine.
It's good. Well, of course, the Cadbury's all metric, so it's all in kilos.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And therefore,
Yes.
ta-da! We've got a box for fuel. Lovely. Now, how much fuel can we take? Looks like probably about 150. Just as a rough idea. Oh, it's close. That'll do for now. So 150 litres, it looks like we can safely take in that current configuration. Brilliant. And of course, then over here, we've got a longitudinal balance diagram and a lateral balance diagram. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good. It's got some funny markings. Now, I've actually put a key on here, what those markings even mean. So there's no excuses. But it's safe to say, if this has all been done correctly, and of course we'd normally also do this, we could do this all manually. We haven't got time for that tonight. The black square is with the fuel that we've just said we're going to take, 150 litres. The orange is where the low fuel warning light comes on. And that's around about 12 to 14 litres. Remember, that's less than the 20 we said. And we're not going to use that as it's time to land, are we? That's a case of, right, we really have screwed this up. And we really obviously should land, but that's not, we don't let that happen. So we land with our 20 on board at least, and ideally more than that, i.e. 30, typically. And then we've got the triangle, which is
Empty.
empty. And I did touch upon it. Can you remember what I said about the triangle does need to be above this bottom black line, which is the minimum weight of the Cadbury, depending on the balance of it. As you can see, it does vary slightly. So why? How can a helicopter be too light?
Because it'll be outside the control forces and ability to auto-rotate.
It's the auto-rotate in particular the auto-rotate. If it's not heavy enough, it doesn't fall fast enough. If it doesn't fall fast enough, you don't get enough airflow through the underneath the rotors, induced flow from beneath, doesn't turn them. They stop. And then you really do land with a big bump. Yes, it mustn't be too light. Now, I think I've done this before. I played around with the Cadbury weight and balance, and even with the possible lightest person in there that's probably, 5 years old, etc., can just about manipulate the controls, still falls within the minimum weight if they ran out of fuel. So it's actually really good like that.
What with no pilot?
But they're with no pilot. Yeah, with no pilot. It doesn't fly very well, actually. Well, actually, it flies quite good. It flies better than some people can fly it. So just that could always be a question that you get asked: why is there a bottom minimum weight for the helicopter? It could be controls, but it's very much auto rotation as well.
When converting liters, as in you put it in the helicopter, to weight,
Yes.
how much SG just do you do? Just use 0.72?
Yeah,
or do you
0.72.
If it's a hot day, just
Well, avgas is pretty stable. It's not like turbine fuel where it does move around a little bit, and then we
Oh,
don't even go down the route of where there's any water in there or not. So yeah, avgas is normally always just considered 0.72. It's pretty damn stable, even at temperatures and those sorts of things. And of course, it doesn't absorb any water.
So on Jet A, we vary between 7.7 and 8.2, depending on the temperature.
Yes. Yeah. But the avgas is very stable, so it's just 0.72, no problems at all. The specific gravity, and of course in metric it's lovely and easy, isn't it? Because 1 litre literally weighs 720 grams. Easy. Good. Okay. And then on this weight and balance, this is the nose of the helicopter, but that's the tail of the helicopter. So if sometimes, just to get this into our heads, if we drew a helicopter on my screen, exactly where would the nose be? It's down this end, and where would the tail be? Is it just like that big? So we're talking like a little helicopter. Just trying to get the scale of this envelope in your head. Have a look at the measurements.
So what we got now on the bottom, so that's
These are
19
in millimeters.
Wow. So that
So we're talking
envelope,
1900 and I think it's 15 or something like that. 1915 millimeters up to 2125. So we're talking a little over 19 centimeters after the datum to just a little over 21 centimeters of the datum.
in real time, in real terms, it's about that big.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
That is the
In real
balance.
terms.
Think of it as that, once again, imagine that seesaw. You know, if you had a little balance weight in the middle, you can only shift it at a very small amount. So otherwise you'll be way out of your limits and therefore control inputs. It's small.
Yeah.
And that's the 4.5. You wait, you see the left and right. Look at the distance in left and right. It's from minus 80 millimeters to plus 80 millimeters, 16 centimeters. It's about,
yeah.
it's about like that. It's about like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's left and right. It's tiny.
About that much.
Yeah, balance left and right. That's where it needs to fall within that center of gravity. It's titchy. And this is why I said to you about, now imagine drawing the helicopter on that screen. It's massive, isn't it? It's huge. Because some people think, oh yeah, the nose is here and the tail's there. It's like, nah, the tail's over there and the nose is over there somewhere. And it puts it into perspective and like, oh my God, it's tiny, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a tiny, tiny little envelope of balance or center of gravity. Really important to remember that.
Do you get to the point, I know, on your side to side, where if someone leans a bit further over towards the window or sits into the middle, so if they're leaning on the armrest, or
significantly,
you're
because you can see how sensitive it is.
Yeah,
we're talking, what did I say? It's about 6. Well, it's not even. It's 16 centimeters, isn't it? It's not a lot. So yes, right. If you shift your body weight over, whilst it's not your whole body weight, yes, it's noticeable. Yeah, very
so
much
you
so.
Can feel someone.
Oh God, yeah, you can feel people moving in the back of aircraft, those sorts of things. If everybody runs down the back end of a plane, I bet you notice that.
When the trolley's being moved, you actually see the trim change.
Can you see that? Have
Really?
you?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's significant,
the weight
isn't
on
it?
the trolley and how far it is.
It's about 100 kilos traveling over 20 meters.
I was going to say the distance from the CG, from the balance point. Yeah, significant, isn't it? Yeah, 44. You can feel people moving around.
Please
if you
don't
just
serve the people at the back till I've burnt a bit of fuel off.
If I adjust the altimeter for somebody in the 22, you have to pull the cyclic slightly back. Yeah, it's very sensitive, which is why it's so critical, because of control input. You might run out.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
That's something I've never realised it's quite that.
Yeah, that's why I thought I'd do that.
Yeah.
I ought to. I might actually one of these days actually superimpose the side of a Cadbury on there, and all you'll see is about the door. That's about all you'll see, the luggage compartment.
That's the
Jesus.
That's the manual Embraer cheap. That's an empty airplane I did the other day. So that's the balance envelope.
Oh my God.
So, and that's with lots of fuel on as ballast to just bring the CAG just inside the envelope.
Purely to bring it in.
Inside the envelope.
Yeah. We with the 44, we see something vague, not quite as complex as that, but something vaguely similar. That if you have two big people sitting in the front of the R44, you have to try and fill it up with lots of fuel just purely to pull the tail down. but you might not be able to fill it right up with fuel. So you discover you can't fill up with fuel, but you need lots of fuel to pull it in. But you also can't run it very low because it then goes back outside the balance envelope. So suddenly you can't even run it down to your allowed minimum of just say 10 gallons.
Yeah.
You might discover 20 gallons. Actually, you'll fall outside the CG. So that's where you need to land. So you've got from say, whatever, 35 gallons down to 20, which buys you about 1 hour. But you've got to keep that fuel within that range, like David just showed, to stay within the balance envelope. Otherwise, you will run out of rearward cyclic and you won't be able to stop the helicopter from going forwards. Okay. Any questions on the balance side of things? So they are separate but go together. The weight is very different from the balance, but they definitely go hand in hand because the weight impacts on the balance. So would it be true to say the balance therefore impacts on the weight?
Yes.
Yeah, as I just described. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you've got a very awkward balance sheet, you need the weight to pull it in, but you might not be able to utilize all of that weight / fuel. Good.
And like you said about someone that's quite light in the jet ranger, they need a bit of
they need ballast up front, just to pull them in to get the nose down, otherwise it's too heavy. It's got to be quite cautious how much fuel you put in. Whilst they could take full fuel as far as weight is concerned, the balance might become a bit of an issue if you haven't got enough weight in the nose of the helicopter to pull that down. Definitely. Good.
On a practical point of view, and especially when it comes to things like skill sets, are we exposed to a manual edge?
Potentially, yes. They're certainly capable of it. And I think how I would normally play it. So if somebody new came to me, wanted to self-fly higher is always a good example, and they definitely seem to know what they're talking about. I wouldn't necessarily make them do that, but if they kind of got their app and just said, look, we're all right. Oh, very good. What if that wasn't working? Oh, well, I'd use a balance sheet. And you think, right, and they're now clutching at straws. Oh, okay, yes, that's a good idea. Where would you find? And I'd go down that route. Not to be awkward, but just to see if they understood. But if somebody just punched some numbers into the spreadsheet and then said, oh, yeah, but this figure comes from there, that's there. Look, if I do that, I could play. They clearly know their way around it. I'd be quite happy with that because they're not just punching in a couple of numbers and hopefully they're getting an answer. They understand how it works. But yes, you should be quite capable of doing a manual, and these are not very complicated aircraft, a manual balance sheet to give you that wonderful understanding of this spreadsheet. Like I just picked up on that. I didn't do it on purpose. I was just working in pounds for a second there, thinking 150 pounds. And I just looked at that and thought, that ain't right. I can tell you straight away something's wrong. What have I done? Is it the calculators in here, or is it me? I've probably done something wrong. And sure enough, I punched the wrong numbers in. It's that easy on apps and those sorts of things. It's so easy. Just double hit a zero, and you've put too much in there or not enough, haven't you? Etc. Etc. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Any questions on that then?
It is related. I'm trying to work out on SkyDemon how to add the numbers to actually make the envelope. Because
yes,
I can get
it's in
the weight.
kilos, isn't it? It's all metric on SkyDemon.
Well, because I can get the weight envelope, but I can't get the lateral envelope. So I've got to look up how you add that to the.
It's a very good point because we everybody's seen that. I'll just stop sharing that. SkyDemon is brilliant. You know, he's really, really good. I'm a good advocate of it. You know, it is a fantastic tool if you use it correctly. And the fact that it can do everything, virtually everything for us, is really cool as well. But from a teaching point of view, as an instructor, I don't want you to put all your eggs in one basket. Whilst it can do all that, that's brilliant. But I'd rather you spread those eggs around a little bit and maybe use SkyDemon just for the planning side of things, and use for weather, perhaps the Met Office, and then for weight and balance, maybe a spreadsheet, or actually just do it by hand, and so forth, so that you're not reliant on just one source of information or just one app, or, you know, so what if it doesn't work? What if it's, you know, your subscriptions run out?
On electronic aids on the flight deck. So we use electronic apps to work out our takeoff performance and to do other elements of performance. So we have to do it as an independent calculation every single takeoff and landing. And we also have to do pre-flight calculations for alternates on routes and stuff as well. So we have to do it independently. And I'd say it probably takes 3 goes of someone getting an error before we have information that matches when we do it independently.
Really?
Really.
Just from
that's from literally every single time. The number, it's so easy to put wrong numbers in, or a decimal point wrong, or just click a wrong box. And then, which is why we have to do it completely independently of the same information. They compare the results, and you go, I haven't got that. And then you go, right, he's made a mistake then. And
one of us has done it wrong, or both have, and it's actually
there's
completely
three
different
we
answer.
have to go back and do it all again until we both get the same answer.
Until you match. Yes, it's good. It is so easily done, isn't it? Really got to, and of course you as the sole pilot, you're checking your own work, so it's easy to just go, yeah, that's fine. It's like that classic, yeah. Like, come on, seriously, is it giving you the answer you're expecting first of all? Those sorts of things. Good. Okay. Any other questions on weight and balance then? So, and of course, the whilst this one, or the spreadsheet you were just looking at online is for what I've done for the Capri G2. I've also got Robinson ones on there. It looks very similar. It's all the same stuff. It's all the same thing. Look at the position of the arm or the datum of the thing you are trying to calculate, i.e. the pilot, measured from a datum. Look at the weight that's on there. Multiply those, you get the moment, the force, don't you? And then eventually you add up all the individual weights, including the aircraft and fuel, etc., etc. You add up all of the moments that it's created by putting people and fuel and baggage. And you just divide that whopping great big number by the weight, ta-da, and you get your average or center of gravity, don't you? With fuel, without fuel, or how much fuel you plan to take, and I say with zero fuel in case, heaven forbid, you ran out of fuel, you can still fly the thing to the ground, i.e. auto-rotate, and be able to move all the controls around. That's it. It's really not that complicated when it's summarized like that. And then you've got left and right, which is actually really easy because thankfully that's just plus and minus numbers. And you end up with a figure that's normally fairly close to zero if things gone well. So if you've got a wildly wrong, big number left and right laterally, you've definitely done something wrong. It's normally very small numbers, relatively speaking. Okay, let me, then I said things like, so when we talk about the flight performance, let's move on to hover out of ground effect versus hover in ground effect. So HGE to HIGE. What on earth is all that about?
So hover in ground effect takes advantage of the cushion of air as you're above the ground.
Yep.
Out of ground effect is any point above that where you're no longer receiving that benefit. To a altitude limited by other environmental factors.
Good. And let's see what you know here. Are you looking at it?
I might have just.
And so the hover in ground effect assumes you've got ground effect, i.e. ground cushion.
Yeah.
How much of a ground cushion? Good cushion, bad cushion? Wait, stop looking at it. Does it specify the size of the cushion, the density of the cushion, or?
It does specify the wind as well, and where that wind's coming from.
Yeah, good. But what about that cushion itself? Is there a way of measuring the ground cushion? I'm just buying time, by the way. I'm quickly trying to open up a it's the CM amendments. I didn't mean to click on that one. Actually, I don't think I've got the flight menu here, remember, have I? Training guide, save notice, take it. I'll have to get it off the website. Okay.
It doesn't state the size of the cushion. I'm just trying to remember the figure.
It's the height of the skid above the surface.
How many
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, it's the height of the skid above the surface, which is going to be
2 feet.
Yay! As far as I'm aware of, always happy for anybody to correct me because I certainly don't know everything. That's for certain. That's weird. It's 2 foot in all helicopters, I think, because it's just the industry standard of how they're going to calculate this. So it's Hovey helicopter at 2 foot, and that's considered in ground effect. And we'll take our calculations from that 2 foot hover. So when we do power checks in the hover, we're kind of meant to do them at 2 foot. The good news is if you're doing them at 3, 4, or 5 foot, you're erring on the side of caution. Because if it can achieve that, it can definitely achieve a 2 foot hover, can't it?
So I always want to be a bit higher because it's a bit safer to
absolutely.
But just, I'm surprised the two aren't.
Just as long as you understand, it's 2 foot. That doesn't mean say you hover at 2 foot. It just means that's where it's kind of calculated from. So Hopefully you can see I've gone on to the Robinson website. Onliners. Oh, Sophie, you there? Or Dawn? Dawn, can you see where it says R22 Pilots Operating Handbook?
Yeah, I just see the top of your browser, your address bar.
Ooh, that's weird. Right, let's just try that again. Let's see why that would be. How about now? I just saw it on a different screen.
Yeah, I saw it on the full screen.
Can you see full screen now?
No, it's gone back.
No.
Yeah, I can see full screen, Paul.
Oh, that's weird. So can you see where it says R22 Pilots Operating Handbook?
I can see that.
Yeah, I can see
the
it.
whole screen, including the taskbar.
I can see everything.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, Dawn, just check your settings because it sounds like everybody else can see it.
Okay.
So just have a little look. All right, so in amongst I'll put it up there. If it will resize it properly. It's bound to be a shortcut for that. Yay. So, oh no, it's going to be a pain in it. I can see what it's going to do. Oh man, sorry. Just bear with me. Where am I going to put you? You're all going to have to move over. Oh Christ, now what have I done? I'll do for a second. Right, so where would I find maybe hover in or outer ground effect charts in the POH?
Under the performance section.
Should we try performance?
Paul, all we can see is your study guide list. Can't see anything else.
Oh, thanks, John. Okay. All right, just bear with me then. Let me try this again.
Philip.
Which screen is it then? So it won't be that one. See, it's definitely there, isn't it? Let's try that again. How about now, John?
That's better. I can see the operating handbook sections.
Hey, excellent. Dawn, can you see that now?
Yep.
Good. Righty ho. Let's say, bear with me. Need an IT expert here, John. Right. Okay. So just ask where might we find? Okay, Ross, come back here. This is your helicopter. He's just chickened out. I just thought I'd let you know. No. Okay.
I was going to say it's a good section, but it's the wrong aircraft.
Yeah. So what do you reckon? In performance? Well, let's find out.
So is the Robinson operating handbook free, but the Cadbury you have to pay for?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it is. That's why I put the Cadbury one in Dropbox for you. A copy of it. And sure enough, even though Ross Scarpa, look, he got it right. Hey, of course it's in performance, which is exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? So we can see that we've got in-ground effect hover, for instance. So let's just jump onto this. Let me see if I can move everybody over a bit. I can't remember. Can I drag that across? Oh, God. Oh, that's better. Right, there we go. Okay, so do we use this one? Oh no, they're on the wrong side. I can't get to the scroll bar easily enough. That's it. Is this the right one to use? I really need Ross back, don't I? I mean, it says, look, R22, in-ground effect, 2 foot, skid clearance, full throttle, and 104% RPM. To do it like that. Oh no. Damn it. Here he comes. Ross, don't worry, you did get it right. What's section 5?
That was
Yes, because don't forget, so all you any Robinson people, we need to check because there's different models of R22. So our one is a Beta 2. It's got an 0360 J2A engine. Good. Hover controllability with 17 knot wind, substantiated up to 9,000 foot density altitude. Sometimes people think that's a wind limit, a crosswind limit. It's not. It's just saying it's demonstrated, isn't it? So, Ross, how do we use this then? Look, in ground effect, 2-foot skid clearance.
So we've got pressure, altitude, and temperature, outside air temperature.
Yeah.
So if we follow the line, so we've got 10, so it's 10 degrees outside.
Yep.
And I see gross weight, so
that's in kilos. Down, try the bottom.
yeah. Right.
That's it. Down in pounds
So,
is down here.
Down in pounds. So we've got, say we're at maximum weight, 1370.
Yep, black line.
Yeah, black line, 1370, 10 degrees outside. So it's about there.
Yep. That's the 10-degree line here, just there. Because that one's a 0.
Yeah.
That's my eyes go funny. Then what we do is we go all the way across to the left.
It's just
and allegedly can achieve
8,800. So
that's right.
Yeah.
Just a little under 9,000 foot.
Yeah.
Pressure altitude. Remember, it's not density altitude, pressure altitude as well. That's allegedly what it can achieve in ground effect.
Yes.
Which means 2 foot off the ground. Just remember that.
Yeah.
That's not a high hover or anything. That's not a vertical descent or anything, is it? That is, you can just about get it back into the hover. It should be able to hover at 9 foot based on what we just discussed.
Yeah.
If you're at full weight, 10 degrees, if it was 10 degrees. We can see, of course, if it's colder, potentially it can manage more. Why is that? Why is if it's, down to minus 20, for instance, it allegedly can do nearly 11,000 foot hover.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And that goes to say not just simply the engine likes it, but the rotors like it and all the rest of it. Yeah, everything likes it. There is a small assumption, once again, that this is a very steady pilot. For instance, not wiggling the controls around, not using full car beat, it's just as necessary. No wind. And it's a good R22, not a worn out one, of course. Good. Okay, so how would you, what would you think the hover outer ground effect chart would look like?
The chart layout itself would be very similar, but the numbers are going to be vastly different.
In which way? Better or worse?
Worse.
Yeah, good. Of course, yeah, worse. So we better just make sure I scroll down to the right one because I just didn't quite see. So outer ground effect, 0 in, limit manifold air pressure, blah, 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 full throttle. I should say blah, blah, sorry. Is that the right one?
So gross weight in kilos at the top, so it'd be pounds at the bottom.
Engine.
Good, that's right. Wrong one. Look, that's R22 standard.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, outer ground effect. Yep, good. And nope, still no good. Next one.
Beta.
And then finally, hey, good, right, okay. And so, of course, if we did a similar sort of thing, it said full weight, 1,370 pounds, 10 degrees. God, it's hard to see from over here. Yeah. It is about there, isn't it? I think. Yeah, oh, no, it's minus 10, sorry. Plus 10, plus 10, plus 10. God, jeez. It goes down. It's around about there. Does that look about right?
Closer.
Yeah, you stick your finger on the screen, on the telly screen.
I'll follow the 10. So it is where your mouse
is. And that equates to, yes.
Less than 5,000.
Nearly half.
Yeah.
Remember, the other one nearly managed 9,000 in ground effect, outer ground effect, i.e. But what do they mean? Do they mean just greater than 2 foot hover? What do they mean by outer ground effect?
Out of the cushion, so they could mean, greater than 2 foot.
Because at 2.5 foot, are you out the ground cushion? No. So what's just a rough rule of thumb for ground cushion? 0 wind for a minute. So just forget the wind on just an average surface. So say shortish grass or something, which is quite good for holding ground cushion. What is typically in/then out of the ground cushion?
I'm going to say 8 feet because that's got something to do with certification.
Isn't it 2 times the rotor diameter?
Oh, we've got some says 2 times the rotor diameter. All right. Anybody, any advances on that? method.
No, I was thinking, right.
It
so
is
along the lines of
typically
rotor
3/4 of your rotor diameter. If you are within 3/4 of your rotor diameter, so if you think of the R44 with a 33-foot rotor diameter, then if you are, you know, up at a good sort of 20, what's that, 16 over 8 off there, about 24 footish, something along those lines, theoretically you might just about, and that is, as far as I'm aware, it's not the skids, that's the rotor disc. So if you stuck it on its end and then kind of went up to that there with the rotor disc, you should just about maybe right on the cusp of whether you're getting any of the ground cushion or not. So 3/4 of the rotor diameter was a guide.
Oh, so in this instance, about 18 feet then.
Yeah, yeah, is it? Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
With the rotor disc.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean to say 100 foot.
Yeah.
It just means outside of that. Because once you're outside of that, you're out of that ground effect. So it doesn't matter if you're off 50 foot, 100 foot, etc., etc. As far as that's concerned, you're out of the ground effect. So it means it should manage a hover that's greater than 3/4 of the rotor diameter. In other words, not relying on the ground effect. Good. But yeah, you can see it's kind of on the R22, it's about half. And we could look at the Cadbury one. Now the Cadbury, I'm not going to go through the Cadbury one right now. It's a smidgen more complicated. Have you looked at it?
Yeah, you're going to weight correction first.
That's right. It's not quite straight. This is easy, isn't it? This is dead easy. Yep, literally. You can do it any which way around you like. Say, right, I want to go and hover out of ground effect. The landing site's at 6,000 foot pressure altitude. Can I do it? Well, how warm is it? And you could go across. Well, I reckon it's only going to be about 10 degrees up there, etc. How heavy are you? Well, I'm at 1,300 foot. Yeah, fine. Well, how heavy can we be? Ooh, no more than whatever it was, 1,350-ish. Right, so make sure we don't weigh more than that. We should be all right. Or you can, you can do it either way around, can't you? What's the maximum, or what do you plan to be, etc., etc. That's a nice, easy one. That's it. The Cadbury one's a little bit more tricky. It does a bit of an odd thing whereby it has this, it will perform as if it's this heavy, even though it isn't that heavy, and you use that against then the chart itself. So it's okay. Once you get the hang of it, they do an example on there, don't they? You kind of go across that one and then across another one. That's it. You have to kind of stitch. If you put the pages together, it makes sense. If you print them out and glue them together, it makes a bit more sense then.
You also get all your climb rates and everything else at the same time.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions with those hover in or out of ground effect charts then? Now, so how often do we refer to those then? Every time we go flying? Ross, how many times have you referred to that during your training?
In the local area, not many.
Yeah.
Because
of, well, I don't think I'll be landing the elevation.
Exactly. Yeah. When you put it into context, if you look on there, typically the chart doesn't necessarily start until, well, if you take that one, for instance, about 1,500 foot. And that's at full weight. And that's at over 40 degrees, I think, isn't it? Is that plus 40 there?
Yeah, plus 40.
Yes, so you can see that generally we just don't fall onto the chart.
So even at 40 degrees, which we would never get here.
We have, didn't we? Was it not last summer, the summer before? Yeah, 42. Was it 42 degrees it went up to? Summer's 40 point something, wasn't it? Summer's seen them out. Theoretically,
would I be able to achieve a high hover going into Class A airspace?
In reality, can it actually achieve it though? And this is always something to consider. Just because it says on there allegedly it can achieve it, you know, we can achieve a 1,500 foot pressure altitude hover at 40 degrees or even greater than 40 degrees. Can it?
It was the perfect helicopter with a test pilot.
That's right, exactly. Yes, it doesn't mean to say it will do it. So always bear that in mind. And that's why when we do our confined areas things, we're always assessing the power, aren't we? Just because we think it can do it doesn't mean to say it can do it. Just because the chart says it can doesn't mean to say it can do. You always got to just remember that. But as you can see that for the most part, flying in the UK, you wouldn't normally. Oh, the sun's shining on that. You wouldn't normally need to refer to that unless you plan to land at a higher altitude landing site. Plus, I'd say round here, well, you can judge its performance by what it's like getting off the ground of the helipad or the airfield. You've had plenty of oomph, by the time we get to where we're going, it's probably going to have even more, isn't it? If it struggled out of here, don't be surprised if it struggles when you get to confined area. Very easy to assess, isn't it? Good. Right. Then I thought we'd have a little chat about, just leaving it till last for the moment. We've kind of been touched on some of the performances of the helicopter, be it the weight, which we now know impacts, of course, whether it can hover out of ground effect, the amount of fuel we can take, which will impact on just how far we can go in one hit, whether we need to stop for refuel. We've already realized that just because we can take an hour and a half worth of fuel, and the destination is an hour and a half away, have we got fuel at the destination? If not, okay, how much longer is that going to be, etc., those sorts of things. And that's, we've just been looking, if we did want to go to a higher altitude location, we'd need to look very carefully at the charts, just to already give us the heads up as to whether it's going to be, a tricky one, or no, it should be all right. We'll just need to keep a close eye on it when we get there, whether it's have the performance to land in the way we want to, because you might be visiting a site that requires a steeper approach because it's a private site. If you're approaching an airfield, it's generally much easier because you can just come in at a lovely shallow angle down a runway. But we're not talking it. We're saying, like we do, we'll go to a lunch at a lovely restaurant somewhere, positioned on the side of a hill, blah, blah, blah. Good.
Good thing about helicopters, then.
That's exactly it. That's why we fly them. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's what we do with them. So we get into the whole planning. And again, it's a very lengthy subject, so I'm not going to try and go through the whole lot. But what do we want to consider with the planning aspect? Yep, definitely.
En route winds, airspace we're going to be going through, NOTAMs, AICs.
The mated brief. There's a lot in there.
Yeah. And all really good answers, by the way. Absolutely top answers. Anything else? I was trying to listen. I think I heard everything. There's a couple of things missing. So maybe some really important ones.
Well, the actual route we'll have to fly because of all those.
Yeah, good. The route. And how about the destination? I haven't said.
Where is it?
Yeah,
exactly. And why, it's I know that sounds really obvious. Well, of course, you need to, the destination. But just like punching in a postcode on a sat nav, we're in a helicopter, we might be going to a private site. Do you really know where that is? Have you got all the information? Have you looked it up properly? What if you plan to go to the wrong site? That's going to look mighty silly, isn't it? So you better double check. You've definitely got it right. You are going to the destination. So we'll do a real simple planning. So we're going to go from, this is where Skydim really excels, isn't it? We're going to go from, just realised I'm not sharing the screen. Sorry. You'll be able to have a look at what I'm doing.
New laptop.
Sorry. See, look, it does two of them.
Screen one.
Why is it? Because it shows me two screens, doesn't it? So, what can you see now, John?
I can see Sky Demon.
It's the sun just going across the lens of my camera, isn't it?
So, John,
yeah, good. That's good. Well done, John. Good, thank you. Nobody else can see my Sky Demon, though. Sorry. Coming. There we go. Right, there we are. Everybody in here can see it now. And
that changed to be very wide screen and compressed now. So I do see Sky Demon, but it's quite squashed.
Yes, I don't know why it does that. All right, John.
I can talk about after the end.
Oh, what do you reckon?
Because you've got two different displays, and the fonts change size. And
you think he's resizing?
Yeah,
let me just try that again. Let me just try. I've done that. Is that better?
Stand by to say that's still compressed. It's all right. We can see what you need, but just bear in mind if it's on your big screen, it looks like it's very compressed.
Okay, understood. All right. We'll go with it now. Ross reckons he knows the answer.
I think.
Yeah. It's probably better when it's on the other screen. Okay, so I've done, we're going to go from Elstree to Duxford. And I'd normally say, right, well, can we do that? As in, not go to Duxford, although they're shut right now. Can we simply fly that line?
What's en route of that line?
Yeah, could be obstacles, airspace en route. What else is not quite right about that? I mean, it says Elstree. Look, we're going from Elstree.
We have to
Is it because you're not going via the exit point?
Good, yeah, absolutely. So usually when I'm doing this, if we're on a paper chart, I'd say, for instance, why don't you fly somewhere close to the destination? For instance, I don't know, maybe Royston, just as an example, and then we'll work out the last bit in a second, and then we'll get ourselves out of Elstree and fly to somewhere nearby. I'll just put, just for a second, South Mims, and see if that works. And we'll fathom out how we're going to get out of the airfield. So, and this is exactly what we do, isn't it? When we think about it, we get ourselves out of the airfield, we get ourselves all sorted, done a free DAP check, maybe change freaks onto Farnborough, all this sort of jazz. Go find an easy place to start from. X marks the spot, so maybe a junction on the motorway, like I say with the A1 is brilliant, very easy to find. And then we can go from there. That can be our starting point, can't it? Literally. And then we go to somewhere, again, that is also relatively easy to find. The southern tip of Royston, the A10 goes into Bognor, it's got bypasses around it, it gets, etc., etc. Good, and that should be relatively easy to find. Somewhere close to the destination. So you should never ideally plan to just go straight to the airfield of your choice, because if you misjudge timings, you might end up literally over top of the airfield without realizing it.
Oh, someone rubbish.
Yeah, so you want to go just somewhere near it. Good. And then you'd get to, oh, it's Catherine. And then you'd get into the whole whether that route is actually okay to fly. Now, so on here, we wouldn't necessarily have to put it starting from Elstree. We could just purely put South Mims, but why would I choose, perhaps if I'm using Sky Demon, to say go from Elstree? I know I'm going to go from Elstree, and I know I'm going to go to South Mims.
Fuel planning.
Fuel planning, good. So it's the length of time it takes, isn't it? Now, I wouldn't just purely believe, I would use my common sense and think, right, well, today, let's just say the wind is westerly, just for a second. We'll go out via Alpha, around the corner, around here, blah, blah, blah. I am with Ross, so to be honest, that's going to take a half hour.
Yes.
Or, I'm with Malcolm, he's a bit of a speed demon, 10 minutes we'll be there. So I would use actually a bit more common sense. I wouldn't just purely believe what the Sky Demon said to me, because there's an assumption it makes that might be that you instantly catapult out of Elstree at the given airspeed you put into it. It doesn't necessarily, for timing purposes, allow for startup. Is the helicopter hot? Is it cold? Which helicopter? Yada yada. We can put some of that parameter, but I'd rather just think of that in my head and just I'd know roughly how long that would take. Like I said, otherwise I could drag that route around if we really, really wanted to. Like so, something along those lines, roughly speaking, isn't it? We're going to kind of do something like that. Good. And then of course, therefore, same with the other end. Let's just for a second say it's a westerly wind. Well, in that case, ideally, I'm probably going to want to try and join downwind at Duxford, fly their circuit, etc., etc. Then we would look at the route and decide whether that's okay. And I'd be thinking, you know what, that's getting a bit close to Luton's airspace there. I mean, they are nice people, but that's making it difficult for them, because also if you don't fly accurately, you could be heading for their airspace. Do you realize that? I'm going to have to intervene, blah, blah, blah. The port control, if we're not talking to them, they've got to decide whether we're going to infringe. And it's just a lot of work for somebody and a lot of paperwork if we get it wrong, isn't it? So we could put a bend in there like this, maybe. But as far as instructing is concerned, we want to sink our teeth into a decent heading hold. And this might only be, as it suggests, 15 minutes long. It's not a really decent heading hold. It's all right, but it's not a proper, So I would suggest on this occasion, is actually we just tweak the bottom end and say go from maybe where the railway line goes over the motorway. Now that does pull us a little bit close to Stansted Stub, but it's kind of about equalish distance. But the reason why when I set this up, because we tend to get you all to fly this particular route, is in the early days, it virtually follows the railway line that goes from the southern tip of Cuffley or south of Cuffley right up into Hertford. And so the railway line's a little bit of a safety blanket for planning purposes, because it's quite handy if a line feature happens to be going your way, not purely to follow it, just for a bit of ease of navigation. But watch out, because that line feature then might suddenly take a bit of a turn. And trust me, I have seen plenty of people follow that and head off towards Luton, totally disregarding their heading because they're now so focused on the railway line. It's just a safety blanket. Because as far as visual clues are concerned, after that, that area there on the screen is a bit of a no man's land. There's lots of little villages, but you might not be able to identify them. And good luck trying to pick out all these roads. So you purely got to hold that heading. Anyway. And then it would flag up potentially, and if there's any NOTAMs all up this end. So Skydim is very good. But have I done everything I need to start reading NOTAMs off? Haven't set the altitude or the
date.
Yes, good. So what Skydim intends to do, this is not a masterclass on Skydim of any way, shape, or form, is mine's kind of just set for the moment. It kind of just blank is at 2,100 feet, VFR, and for the R22 just 75 knots, just as an average cruising speed for now. And it will do today or tomorrow. So I've got to put in there a specific time. So I could put a specific time in there. Today at 8 o'clock. Is that 8 o'clock local or UTC?
Say.
No, it doesn't. It's UTC. It works with, yes, that's 9 o'clock tonight.
No.
All right, we'll just use that for now. That's fine. And now, potentially, it will, of course, put up all the NOTAMs up here with Elstree, etc., etc., etc. I say again, I'm not going to scroll through them all, but it does. And, you know, as long as we put the right inputs down here, date and time, or leave it as maybe just the whole of today, it's a fairly safe way of checking NOTAMs. But if we were trying to do it, how else could we check the NOTAMs?
Well, other sources. There could be,
in particular, the NATs. Yes,
Yeah.
That's really the real proper. You know, that's where we should go to really for NOTAMs. Well, I'm using the wrong words. That's you see, the syllabus doesn't actually specify where you get NOTAMs from, and therefore it can't say go to Skydemon or don't go to Skydemon. It can't say any of the other, even Google. I don't know if they still do it. Did NOTAMs at one point, and then there's all sorts of independent people that created NOTAM maps, and so. But NATS is definitely probably the most recognised place, isn't it? Because it's National Air Traffic Service and it is provided for us pilots, isn't it? And NOTAMs is one of those things. If we go into there, as well as all the publication and chart updates. So again, got no issues with one of our students using Skydim as long as if I said if that didn't work, where would you get it from? Oh, I go straight to the NATS website. Have you ever used it? Yes. You know, a bit clunky I find, but it's okay. But they know how to do that. Good, that'll be fine. I'll be happy with that. And that they triple check they're putting in the right flight details, the date, the time, if they're being very specific or blanket it for today. I'd be okay with that. That's all right. A bit like the weight and balance charts.
Apologies, I have to shoot off.
Yes.
Daughter's coach is an hour and a half early back to school.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, I'm about to wrap up anyway. But thank you so much for attending anyway. Thank you. Thank you. And so it's always nice to have input from another part of the industry, like the airlines. Interesting, you know, how complex some of your stuff is, but it's actually it's all the same stuff, isn't it? It's all the same thing, just on a bigger scale. See you later. Safe journey.
I use notaminfo.com.
Yeah, there's many different sources, but just remember that it's the NATS website. And we should practice making sure we can get NOTAMs off of there.
Yeah.
but potentially, there might be other ways that perhaps slightly more interactive, especially something like this is great for planning purposes. Okay. So, of course, what else might influence the route? We've said controlled airspace, definitely, vertically, don't forget, as well as horizontally. Got to always think three-dimensionally. You can see, for instance, Stansted CTA starts at 2,500, and so does Luton's over on the left-hand side. And down here is like a horizontal slice of that route and showing you where that controlled airspace is. Over here, the LTMA going into the Luton CTA over here. So we're staying below that. And we can, of course, adjust every single leg. You can even do it like this, look. You can say I'm going to fly this one a bit lower or higher. It's really quite cool. And then when you get into, if you wanted to do it, you could potentially prints out something like this and showing you what you had. There we are. There's the one I just played around with, look, planned and pulled it down. But we still like you to create your own ones for now, rather than using these ones that are automatically created. I think that closes it, not the whole thing, doesn't it? Yeah, good. So what else influences the route?
The route, well, the weather can, but wind direction.
Yeah, potentially the weather, yeah. And I mean, the rainfall radar is amazing. However, of course, don't forget that does actually change. If I can do it, but it's probably going to show us nothing on there because there is nothing really around at the moment. And for the time I've put, so that's not going to work right now yet. What else?
So we check the NOTAMs.
Yep, there doesn't appear to be anything that will influence the route. I've chosen a good, hopefully what I think is a good starting point, and then an IP, an initial point where I'm going to navigate to before I then try and do the last bit of getting into Duxford. What else?
What about temporary restricted airspace?
Yeah, it could be. That's right. Recently, we've had the fly past for the King's birthday, and that restricted where we could fly.
The RATs.
Yes, the rats. That's it. Restricted airspace temporary. What else? Come on, who's going to use their imagination? How about this then? This is one that we created. This is going to Beccles up there. Wow. What have we done with the route?
Okay, so gone through controlled airspace and then taking the coast.
Yeah, because it's often the thing that gets forgotten in amongst the whole going from A to B.
Because it's nice to fly.
Yes.
Because it's fun.
Don't forget that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's nice to actually go a certain way because of the scenery.
Yeah.
And that's half the point. It isn't about, it's not necessarily, oh, well, because we can get there quicker in a helicopter. Well, you can get there quicker in an aeroplane. They are faster. And if you're going from airfield to airfield, then a plane will get there faster.
Airplanes are faster than
Yeah, generally, not all of them, but yes, generally speaking. It's potentially about the route, isn't it? And there's many things that we can see that influence the route. It could be the amount of fuel you can take. It could be the restricted airspace. It could be that we're trying to get around the weather.
Yeah, it's the reason
it could
why.
purely be because I want to go in there because it's great fun and it's a beautiful scenic route to take.
Yeah.
Or it's going through some controlled airspace so I can practice my skills. These sorts of things. Yeah, I think that sometimes gets forgotten. Everybody thinks, straight line it, fast as you can. You think, but don't you want to enjoy the route?
Yeah.
Depends what the purpose of the trip
is. Yes, it does indeed. Yes.
Yes.
Yep. If you are trying to get from A to B fairly expeditiously, straight line it.
Then you're going to go
far straighter line.
Yeah. I'm hungry. I want to go to.
Yeah, that's right. That's it. Just straight. Yeah, so please don't forget that. There's many things that influence the route. Usually it starts off with the safety side of things, of course, but it doesn't have to. It could start off, well, this is what I would like to do. All right, let's have a look at the safety aspects of it. And that might now sort of tweak that a little bit. You might have to alter the route accordingly. So think of everything. Yeah, absolutely. Any questions on that? and for me, in planning, this is one of my favourite bits. You know, that whole. So how are we going to get there? Which way we're going to go? What route we're going to take? And you start to look at a map in more three-dimensional, thinking of the nice places to go without going maybe too far out your way, etc. We don't want to add, you know, necessarily an hour on top of the journey, but it depends what you're doing. It's like it'd be like visiting the Lake District and not actually flying around any of it. It's like, what's the point? You know, if it's just purely to go to somewhere to eat, we could just go somewhere much local, much closer. The whole purpose of going there is because it's beautiful scenery and it's fantastic to fly around. But if it's just purely to go get something nice to eat, right, well, we know places that are far closer than that. Yes, so that has an influence in it, doesn't it? We like going to, when Malcolm's been with me, we've done a trip, haven't we, when we go up to Carnarvon.
I was just going to say that, Carnarvon.
If we can, we like to go over the top of Snowdon. Why? Because you can. It's great. Yeah, if we can do it safely.
Like Lake Verney, because it's got the thing and the restaurant beside it. It's just following the little.
That's right. It could be all
coming back through the Mac loop if you can.
Yep, if it's safe to do so. Yeah, the Mac loop's fantastic to fly.
Yes,
etc., etc. So yes, the choice of route. It's the journey, isn't it? Yeah. So in that planning aspect of it, don't forget about actually the journey. Why are you doing it? Is for enjoyment, those sorts of things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Good. Any questions on any of that?
No,
all right.
Think of anything at the moment.
I say it's just a little. Once again, it's just a touch upon, isn't it? Flight performance and planning. We haven't looked at everything. We didn't get the whiz wheel out or anything along those lines. It's trying to get you, in particular tonight, especially about that fuel, about thinking about the calculation of fuel.
Only the weight and balance being such a small variation.
The tiny window of balance in the aircraft. It's tiny when you actually draw it out. It's minuscule, isn't it? Relatively speaking, we all think it's almost from door to door, and it's like, nope, it's about that big from left to right, and maybe only a touch bigger forward and backwards. That's where the center, the seesawing point needs to be, isn't it? Otherwise, it might not necessarily have it's the cyclic that you run out of.
Yeah.
Whereas the weight, well, it's definitely too much weight is more like you run out of collective kind of things, not entirely true. And too light, yes, the collective doesn't go low enough, it won't auto-rotate. The whole fuel, don't forget about where you're going. Where's the fuel stop? How are you going to get back?
That was the classic, you saying that and saying, well, we're ready to go. Well, yeah, we can fly an hour and a half, but then you've got to go and get fuel afterwards.
Yeah, that's right. Have you thought about that process? What about the burning of the fuel? How much fuel does it actually burn? It depends, obviously, which helicopter, how you fly it, the condition of the aircraft, all sorts of things, isn't there? It's always safer to over-egg it, but if you're not careful, you end up with a calculation whereby you say you've got to fill up with fuel, which you probably can't, and it won't fly far enough, which you probably can.
Well,
so
what
you
if you
need to
don't
be
maintain
sensible.
your cruise speed?
Yes, there's all sorts of things like that, isn't there? Yeah, absolutely. And the performance side of things, yes, we have looked at hover in and out of ground effect charts, and I'm not saying don't use them by a long shot. Yes, of course we should use them, especially if we're going to a high altitude destination. Because you're not into the, for private flying, you're not meant to be thinking, because I want to go and hover at 4,000 foot just to take some photos. That's really not a clever idea. That's whilst perfectly legal, it's just not a clever idea, because if you don't do it right, you'll easily go into something like vortex ring or lose control of the tail rotor, etc. So we don't want you dropping the airspeed down to a hover at 4,000 feet, not above the ground. But a destination at 4,000 foot, yes. But watch it, because the air's a bit thin. Have you had a look at what sort of an approach you can make or will need to make? Because the helicopter might not have hover out ground effect. Yeah. Good. And there's obviously way more than that, isn't there, in flight performance and planning side of things. But let's just touch upon it. And as we saw with David sitting here with the Embraers and things he flies, actually, it's all the same stuff, pretty much.
Yeah. Can't believe that they can fill the trolley.
Yeah, I was quite surprised about that. I am surprised, but I'm not surprised, because they are heavy. And as I say, when you think about where they're moving back from, and the CG ideally needs to be, I think it's about the first third of the the leading edge of the wing, roughly speaking, and around about that
It's fair
area.
like that.
Suddenly, it's way back. Yeah,
It's the arm, really.
yeah, it's a huge
the
arm, isn't
so
it?
You've got
My
that
goodness.
20, 30 kilogram trolley. But
They said
an arm
100
of-
kilos.
Oh, is it as much
Some
as
of them
that?
100 kilos, he
Yeah,
said,
all that
yeah.
booze.
When it's full up.
Of course.
And you say, oh, whopping great. Yeah, not once it's all been drunk.
Then it's distributed.
Yeah, that's right. It's distributed evenly amongst the passengers then. It's a huge long arm, isn't it? And suddenly you think, oh my gosh, yeah, the moment's massive.
It's like going to
It's
the far
huge.
end of a seesaw from nearly the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yes,
got a
of
lot more
course.
effect.
Yeah, it's good to see that as they have to put fuel in just to pull it within the weight and balance. Yeah, I've done
That's
that
what he
before.
was saying when they were training.
Yeah, I've had to do that before with the R44s. Yeah, so it's all the same stuff. No matter how big or small your aircraft, the basics are all the same, which is why we want to learn the basics, and then you can add on all the complexities of the aircraft you're in and those sorts of things. The basics, it's all the same stuff. Always is. Good news. See, it's easy, isn't it, Glenn?
Absolutely.
Hey. All right. Well, thank you for everybody for joining me online. Lovely to see you all.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
And we'll call it a night.